Good evening, everybody. I'm Liz Walker, and welcome to this week's edition of our Facebook live stream, Searching for Healing and Hope. We promised you several weeks ago that we would be here every Tuesday night at 7 o'clock to try to build community around issues that bring us together, not issues that separate us. Tonight, we have a fascinating subject and a really fascinating guest. The subject is Decoding Love, Exploring the Science and Health of Agape. I'm going to say that again. Decoding Love, Exploring the Science and Health of Agape. Most of us think of love as an emotion, or maybe we think of it as a biblical commandment, and it is all of that and much more. But you may not know that love is also a field of study, scientific study. And for a long time, researchers from a variety of disciplines, including sociology, biology, and neuroscience, have explored love's complexities. So tonight, our guest studies the health benefits of love. Dr. Al Campbell, who's a professor in the Department of Psychology at Howard University, joins us. Al is a good friend of mine. He's been at Howard for some 45 years. His focus is on health, neuropsychology, and he's been studying love. I can't help but say this. I just love that idea. Dr. Campbell, join us right now, and I'm going to let Micah bring Dr. Al Campbell on magically. Micah, can you do that? There he is. Hi, Dr. Campbell.
Hi there. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, let's just start. Very basic, I know you're a psychologist, you're a professor, you do research, you do a lot of stuff, but what do you mean when you say you are studying love? Tell me a little bit about the study.
Well, the concept itself, at least the type of love that I'm referring to is that love is a spiritual principle. You did mention that it was, when we think about love, we think about it as an emotion, a feeling, romantic kinds of love, a sentiment even. But what I'm talking about is a different form of love, agape. Agape is a Greek term for love. It's unconditional love. It's a selfless kind of love. Now, there are other forms of love in the Greek. There's phileo, which is, and we get the term Philadelphia out of there, brotherly love or friendship kind of love. And then there's the family love, storge, familial love or love for a pet. And then, of course, when we most often hear people refer to love, it deals with that type of love that we know of as eros. So those are the form of love, different types of love. But as a spiritual principle, agape is a higher form of love. It's unconditional, without judgment. It's without the expectation of receiving anything. It's about giving, selfless form of love.
Now, when I went on and researched, my Google search, let me be clear, but when I went online to look up research on love, what I mainly found were people who were scientists, who were looking at romantic love. So I didn't see a lot of research on agape. I'm going to guess that yours is a rare search. Is it not?
Well, I've looked around to see if people have, if there's been a whole lot of study with respect to unconditional love, and there really hasn't been. Dr. King, the kind of love that he was referring to was that, unreciprocated kind of love. It's about giving. It's not receiving anything in expectation. It's actually the kind of love that you give to an individual because you see them as an equal, that it's a respect for that individual. We're all created in God's image. There's no hierarchy.
Right.
And so we're talking about a kind of a love that you give out of respect for that individual. It's a kind of love that tries to make that, well, not tries to make, but has the goal of uh, of the person who is receiving the love uh, will grow,
Right.
will be their best self.
It's goodwill for that other person. Is this a
Exactly.
matter, Dr. Campbell, is this a matter of studying the heart or the brain?
Well, for the past 45 years, I've been studying the brain. I'm on sabbatical this semester, and in fact, studying in my brother-in-law's laboratory. And what I'm hoping to do this semester is to answer that that question. I know about in my own research the relationship between a proxy for love, which is agreeableness. That's an altruism, actually, which is a facet, it's a dimension of agreeableness, which I think measures closely love. But we've looked at it in terms of how that relates to brain functions. But
Mm-hmm.
I want to extend that model now to answer the very question that you've raised. Is it a matter of the heart or brain? Personally, I think it's both. In fact, I don't think it's the body. The different organ systems have a way of relating to each other chemically or hormonally, but so we're talking about a oneness.
Mm-hmm. What led you to this study? Why did you decide you wanted to do this?
Well, I guess it was back around 2005 or 2006 or so. A friend of mine who is a transplant surgeon, a renal transplant surgeon, I had an opportunity to apply for research money and invited me to submit along with him a proposal. At the time, I was sort of turning my interest to a field known as psychoneuroimmunology, another big word, but basically uh, PNI. And I'll refer to it for the rest of the time as PNI. But PNI basically, addresses the question, how do social events, how do things in the environment get under your skin?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, I was especially interested in that, looking at the effect of stress on health. So, in fact, I think that grant was called something like Stress, Psycho, PNI, and Renal Health. But I was sort of backdooring it because he was a transplant surgeon, and I thought that this model that I was developing would apply not only to the brain, but also to other organ systems. And in fact, the brain and the kidneys and the brain and all of the organ systems are in a conversation with one another. And this would give me an opportunity to eavesdrop on that conversation.
Mm-hmm. Now that answers it in a scientific way or a very logical way. The other thing that I wanted to bring up, because I know this had to have some impact on you, you were born and raised in Montgomery, Alabama,
Born and
and
raised there, yeah.
you certainly know a lot about Dr. King, right? I mean, how was that? Were you a child during those days? Tell me a little bit about
I
your.
was. I was about, let's see, 55. I was 8 years old. I just turned 8 years old. A week or two after the bus boycott started, December
Wow.
1955. And that year I turned, yeah, exactly. I was 8 years old, and then of course when it ended, I was 9 years old. I
Mm-hmm.
attended his church in Montgomery, Dexter Avenue Baptist Church. Um, and it's really interesting because this whole notion of love is the one, it's what he was speaking of.
Right.
Was speaking of a revolutionary kind of love. That's agape. it's capable of bringing about the kind of change that we're interested in seeing today. It's not that manipulative kind of a love. You know, you scratch my back, I scratch yours. There's a benefit to that. There's even a health benefit to that. But we're talking about a higher level, a higher plane of love, and that's agape.
Well, you know, I grew up around that same time in Arkansas, not in Alabama,
Mhm.
but it's hard to explain to young people today how much that growing up in that era and having that one man as a hero affected us. So the notion of love is kind of embedded. It's kind of in all a part of me because of what Dr. King said and did. And to me, and I'm asking you this question the long way,
Yeah.
it seemed that for a while it actually worked as the social movement. Do you think it worked for a while? I mean, obviously he was murdered and that, but do you think it worked at all?
It did, but we have, you know, this firmly entrenched economic and political system. And out of that, of course, we get all the different types of identities. We get racism, we get classism, we get sexism. And it's about maintaining that kind of, through these different kinds of identities, it's about maintaining that hierarchy. So people are willing to go a little bit. I mean, you know, they have, uh, they're willing to push the ball slightly down the road, but not really in this self-emptying kind of thing where you view another person, regardless of race, creed, gender, gender orientation, any of those kinds of things, that you see them as equals. You relate differently to a person when you understand and you see them as equals. So, it's that manipulative form of, if you want to call it that, love, uh, that holds us back, that, from achieving that kind of society that Dr. King actually spoke of, that beloved community, where all of the people in the community are meeting their needs are being met. In fact, there in Acts it talks about that same kind of community where there's no hierarchy, but there's a sharing, a caring that results in everybody's needs being met, and therefore achieving their potential, their full human potential.
It almost, when I say it almost worked, it certainly, we saw young people sacrificing. Dr. King talked about sacrificing for the greater good, being a part of something bigger. And he tied that all into love. So to me, that was such a good example that it made sense. So that's what I'm talking about when I ask, does it work? But do you think that could ever work again, Dr. Campbell?
Will it? But I'm forever the optimist. Is it? Are we going to? We can certainly approximate that goal. There's an end goal. It's a long way off, but I think that it's possible, but it requires great sacrifice.
And
It
we're not.
requires great sacrifice, human sacrifice, and that's something that right now I see an unwillingness. As I've said before, there's this power relationship, and it's sort of related to the whole notion of money and maintain this economic system, this political system. As long as that exists, and there's this hierarchical relationship, control.
Right.
It's going to be very, very difficult.
It's going to be tough. Well, let's get back to the point of this evening, which was to talk about the health benefits or how agape love affects our health. So that's my question. Are you saying that this noble, big goodwill actually makes us healthier? Is that kind of your, hypothesis or your
It's a
plan?
hypothesis. Yes, it's certainly a hypothesis. We haven't gotten to the point. As I've said before, most of the work that you see now deals with romantic love, or it might be friendship, and even that work is showing that there is a salutary or a health benefit to those forms of love. But we're talking about the motivation, uh, the selfless versus a selfish kind of motivation that I think probably leads to, well, certainly I think, in terms of a societal basis, it's going to be more beneficial. But I think that, we're wired, we're set up to for it to benefit our psychological and physical health as well. And physical health is a thing that uh, surprises, well, doesn't surprise me, but I think it grabs the imagination of people, because they say, okay, the psychology and theology, okay, I can go with that. But now you're talking about health benefits from this, from this type of belief system. Not so willing to accept that.
Well, what kind of health can we talk about? So if I have goodwill for the
Yeah,
world,
right,
am I
right.
going to have a better heart, or am I going to be live longer? What kind of hypothesis are you kind
Well,
of?
generally speaking, persons who are religious slash spiritual. We're not talking about institutionalized forms of religion, but we're talking about people that basically believe that a higher power, uh, God, as many people refer to that higher power, those persons that believe in a universe that is set up in this form. And not only that, but live their lives in accordance with those principles associated with that belief, typically are healthier. I mean, the literature just shows that to be true. But it's not any brand of religion.
Right,
We're just talking about a belief in a higher power or a higher force that you actually defer to, that there are certain kinds of principles. We
right.
talk about the golden rule: do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And that, in a way, incorporates this concept, this idea of agape as well, that there is this benefit. Um, you know, how do these kinds of things get under your skin? How do events that take place out here get under the skin to influence and to affect your health? And that's the question in this discipline that I spoke of, this PNI, psychoneuroimmunology, allows you to answer that question.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about this notion of agreeableness.
Okay.
Agreeableness
Sure.
as a personality trait.
Yes.
Tell me a
Right.
little bit more about that. Is
All right.
that lockstep with love? Is agreeableness the same as agape love?
Uh, no, but it contains elements of it. In fact, agreeableness, there are 5 different types of personality cure. Well, there are different personality models. There's this 5-factor model. Agreeableness is one of them. Openness, conscientiousness. Um, there is, let's see, the conscientiousness. Um, One slips me at the moment.
It's all right.
Oh, no, no.
What?
Yeah, yeah. Neuroticism and extroversion, the opposites.
Okay.
Yeah. So you have those 5, but then there's agreeableness, especially in my early work showed that agreeableness was related to inflammation in the body. Generally, when there is inflammation present in the body, higher levels of inflammation are associated with different types of diseases. In my work, didn't expect this, wasn't really looking at this, but we tried a shotgun approach. As I mentioned before, this was a grant that we got, sort of a one-time kind of thing, one-time opportunity, lifetime, opportunity. And so, through some measures in their personality, working with my brother-in-law, that was his area. We put some personality measures in there. I didn't know a whole lot about personality measures. And when we started to analyze the data, we noticed that as agreeableness increased, inflammation decreased. So there was a facet, there's a dimension of agreeableness that is known as altruism. And it's that facet that I think serves as a proxy, closely approximates the meaning of love, the selfless kind of love, unconditional love that uh, you often hear spoken of in theological kinds of circles. I think that this altruism gets at that. In fact, there has been research to show, although it's been limited, and weren't necessarily looking at love, unconditional love, although the term itself is closely related, that there is this health benefit. So that's something that I want to do more of, especially after I get these skills and ability to look at the heart, uh, the activities and yeah, and
Well, I don't know all the terms, and I'm certainly not a psychologist or have no study, but it seems it makes sense to me because the opposite of altruism, I mean, at least I think it is, would be hoarding, holding on to stuff. And when you hold on to stuff, I could see more stress.
Yes.
Yeah. So that makes a lot of sense to me. But when you talk about studying this, Dr. Campbell, are you talking about sticking probes in people's heads and that kind of thing?
No. That was a long time ago when I did stuff like that when I was doing my animal research. I got my degree in physiological psychology, and we actually remove areas of the brain and look for changes in behavior. But now they have neuroimaging in animals, cats, monkeys, and things of that sort. But now, of course, it's possible to do neuroimaging in humans, persons who are healthy, who have intact brain functions, and look at activities within the brain, the flow of blood in the brain. The whole reasoning is that those areas that are involved or support certain cognitive functions, personality functions, are more engaged, and therefore there's more activity in those areas of the brain. So, you look at the brains of people who, neuroimaging wise, those persons who are agreeable, who have high levels of altruism or so. You can also look at heart rate variability. You expect high heart rate variability in people that are more altruistic. Well, let's look and see if, in fact, those things are confirmable.
I find this so very exciting, so very exciting. So what now? The agreeableness makes sense. The idea that what you're doing, how far do you have to go, do you think, before you'll be able to say, I can conclusively say whatever? I mean, do you think you're almost there?
A long way from being there, unfortunately. not in my lifetime, and I don't know how long that is. Sort of getting long in the tooth right now. I've been at Howard for 46 years. So, hey, I wasn't a baby when I got my doctorate. I'm 77 years old right now. So, you're trying to train students that will carry on this kind of work. To answer these kinds of questions, actually, but can make small inroads to, in fact, see if, in fact, we'll see these things. We'll look at people who are high in agreeableness and have high levels of altruism, along with heart rate variability and measures of neurocognitive factors, and then make manipulations as well. We can have people to imagine certain kinds of scenarios. We can we can have them engage in different types of activities or so, to see if, in fact, there are associations between these psychological activities and physiological indices.
Well, I want to continue talking with you, Al, but I wanted to pose this idea to those out there who are listening to us. You can be a part of this conversation because you can put something in the chat and I can read it. But we want you to share this conversation with your community. We want to ask you questions. We want you to think about some ways, how important you think agape is today. Because I wonder, in the midst of all this chaos, is agape even a realistic thing that's happening today? It just seems like we're in a hoarding moment where people are so afraid and so threatened by everything that and
that's
nobody
driving their behavior.
exactly
That's driving their behavior. So,
exactly.
yeah. So
How do we get out of that?
yes, we're talking about organizationally. You're probably you're talking the church has a very important role to play. Yeah, and that's right down your alley. Because the concept, the idea itself, and again, I don't want to just suggest that it's just something with the Christian church or anything. We're talking about this concept, this golden rule: do unto others as you would have. What does that really mean? What do we see when we we're talking about something that is selfless rather than selfish. What is it that I can get out of it? There are going to be these benefits that will come from. You even talked about this hoarding rather than, having my needs met, that's sufficient, comfortable, thriving, persons achieving their full potential as human beings. So it does, this notion about billionaires and all of those kinds of things. That works against really, that itself is an indication about greediness. And
Right.
and it's the way you use your money. Now, billionaires, if they're uh, getting together to solve the world's problems by raising everybody's boats, that's not going to happen. They want to maintain their status in the world as power and control, and that's what we're seeing. And unfortunately, the masses believe in that pipe dream and want to maintain their status such that that they're not willing to try a different revolutionary kind of approach, as would be suggested by Agape.
And as was suggested by King and as was suggested by Gandhi. And again, that time, growing up in that time, which was the worst of times, but it was also the most hopeful of times in many ways because you
Working together. Yeah.
right. You had
Working
leaders.
together. Right now, division actually benefits those people that are on top. As long as you can keep things in disarray, races against the different groups against one another, pitted against one another, then those that benefit are the ones that are at the top.
Absolutely. How much does your faith, because some people would hear this, Dr. Campbell, and think, well, he's just talking about religion, but this is psychology. But how much does your faith play into your
That's a
work?
great deal. Yeah, I mean, in terms of these ideas, when I saw agreeableness and the relationship between agreeableness and inflammation back in 2012, a student had written a dissertation, and she was looking at religion, spirituality, altruism, and she had inflammation in there. And we really didn't see the relationship between religion and spirituality with respect to inflammation. She was disappointed. As a researcher, certainly, we have these hypotheses and we like to confirm them. I was as well. But what we missed was the relationship between altruism and inflammation. It was there for the taking. It was there. It was 5 or 6 years later that I looked back at some data that she had and said, oh my goodness, we missed this. Altruism, because sometimes you see these relationships, but you don't see them for their full meaning at the time. And I'm not a personality psychologist, so I wasn't into that anyway. As I said before, my brother-in-law included that measure in the study because he was one of the co-investigators. So she walked away disappointed and everything. And recently I had a student to take a look at it, and we found that there is a relationship between religion and spirituality, and inflammation, but it's only present when there is when the individual is altruistic. In other words, this love is an action word that you have to. It requires an orientation, and it's an action word. You just can't sit back and feel this way, but you've got to do something. So,
Ah,
in combination with, in combination with religion and spirituality and altruism, if that's the motivating force, if you have emptied yourself and you're concerned about the other individual as much as yourself, then that seems to have that benefit. We talk about inflammation. That's when you see the relationship between inflammation and religion and spirituality. It's not just when you look at the two, but the idea that altruism, interacting with religion and spirituality, brings about this kind of relationship.
can you be agreeable and selfless and empathetic? I don't know about selfless. Maybe
Well, when
that's
you say selfless,
can
yeah,
you be
selfless,
without love. Can you be empathetic and compassionate
yeah,
and giving without love?
sure, yeah. I think you can. Uh, it's possible for a person to act out of those motivations, but again, maintaining that power relationship. It's manipulative. You're trying to get something out of it.
Uh-huh.
We're talking about reciprocation. If I scratch your back, then I'll do it. I'll get this kind of recognition. All of these but that's not the point of unconditional love. It's not looking for, lights and recognition, and money and all of those kinds of things. It is concern for the other individual. Uh, that's the form of love that we're talking about. When we talk about unconditional love versus that kind that you might see, people talk about pro-social kinds of characteristics or so. Compassion would be kindness, tenderheartedness, all of that. But if you're using that to manipulate the other person to get something that you want, and that's really beneficial, it benefits the benefactor. But the kind of love that we're talking about benefits the beneficiary. But we're talking about the kind of love that also, when you extend love, that you receive a health benefit from that. And
Okay.
that's so the bottom line answer to your question is yes, it's possible to be compassionate, agreeable, and all of those kinds of things. But when we talk about the form of love that I'm speaking about, agape, it's unconditional, it's non-transactional, it's not expecting anything in return, and
And
that's a difficult one. That's difficult.
it's
People say, well, that ain't human. And that's what religion and spirituality, it raises you. You can't do this by yourself. There is, we talk about, and for me, I believe, that I need God to raise me to that point, to see the world through his lens or through God's lens, his and gender and all of those kinds of things. Some
you
people,
could use, you
get
could use
offended
they, I guess. You could use their lens. That's kind of
there,
the
but we know God.
right, right. So how has this doing this study for 7 or 8 years? I would imagine your agreeableness has elevated. Has it affected you knowing what you now know, or is it really just something you removed from Al?
The motivations, I see myself as growing, but still, haven't gotten there. Still haven't gotten there. Uh, it requires, um, it you have to really work at it. It requires energy and effort. Uh, and me, it's something that I don't have this power within me alone. Al Campbell can't do this by himself. Al Campbell relies on God to push me across the finish line. It's a partnership. It's a partnership. I knew Al Campbell before, and I know Al Campbell now, and Al Campbell now is a much better person than Al Campbell was before. But when you start talking about psychology and religion and all of those things, there's actually a course that people offer now, and I don't know if you took one, the psychology of religion. In other words, religion theology can be, some of those constructs can be studied scientifically. So,
Wow.
there's no real separation between the except psychology offers a method. Psychology offers a paradigm by which you can study theological kinds of constructs, those that are empirical, observable. So, psychology and religion are sort of benefit each other.
Right, right. Well, I am glad that you're doing the work you do. I have one more question for you, and then we're going to wrap this up, Dr. Campbell. But this has really been a fascinating conversation. How does agape love impact all the other kinds of loves? We started this conversation out talking about philia and eros.
Leo, storge, eros, and
right.
agape. Right. Yep.
So how does agape affect? Does it affect the others? Can it make those better or what?
Okay, that's where we want to get. I think all relationships are better when they're baptized by agape, eros, storge, phileo. When they've been infused with agape, are much better. Because again, we're talking about this selfless form of love. It's not in this to get something, but it's working with that individual, that other individual who may be contrary to you, but not thinking in terms, in a non-judgmental kind of a fashion, and making that person the best person that they can be. Now, that means it doesn't mean letting them have their way. Absolutely not. Love requires truth. And, so it means confronting people when they're acting in a way that is, contrary to the definition of unconditional love. But yes, for those other types of love to function optimally, most efficiently, I think that if they're infused with agape, that will achieve that end that we're speaking of. They're much better off
when they put agape in there. I was again, but we just got a really interesting question I think is going to help us all. Could you provide, this is from Venus Apollo, could you provide a situational specific example of this inflammation that you talk about? It's almost like you're talking about good inflammation and bad inflammation.
Well, there's inflammation that inflammation is a response of the immune system. When there is a physical stressor such as disease present, then the immune system is mobilized to attack the virus, to attack the bacteria, to attack the microorganism. That's when the body is invaded. But then there are those are physical stresses. But then there are psychological stresses because both of them threat. The body is mobilized to prevent damage from psychological threats, from psychological stresses like racism, as well as pathogens like viruses and all of those kinds of things. So the inflammatory process actually, the psychological system came to co-opt the immune and the endocrine system and to use it for its purposes of diminishing the psychological threats. So an individual who is exposed to psychological stress will show elevations in this inflammatory kind of response, the bad kind of inflammatory response, the kind that heart attack, the different types of diseases, Alzheimer, all of. Yep.
Yeah, I'm gonna stop you because I want to go right to the good. I understand bad. So what's the good inflammation that comes with agreeableness?
It's a reduction in the what is it? I guess it's the anti-inflammatories. They're
Okay.
anti-inflammatories. Yep, anti-inflammatories. You'll see elevations in those. Yeah.
Okay. So
Which
anti-inflammatory.
counteract the effect, which counteract the effects of pro-inflammatory cytokines.
So so we can just make it simple by saying the anti-inflammatories are the good inflammation that comes with agreeableness.
Yeah, to some extent, but you just won't see the elevations that you see in the pro-inflammatories are not as great. You may not have necessarily, it's not just necessarily a one-on-one, like the anti-inflammatories are combating the, no, it's not quite like
Not
that.
quite that
It just
simple.
reduces the level of the pro-inflammatory cytokine, and the duration that an individual is being affected by those pro-inflammatory cytokines. If you're, if that threat, if you haven't resolved the issue of that threat over a period of time, that's going to chronically affect you across the different types of organ systems. But if there's a way of coping, a way of adjusting, a way of thinking that will reduce the level of stress,
Gotcha.
then that's going to be beneficial.
Okay, here's another question. Must one have a relationship with God? Now, earlier you said religion, but we're not just talking Christianity, but must one have a relationship with God in order to fully experience agape love? That's a
I don't think so. Yeah. I don't know. I don't think so. Um, I think, the thing is aligning oneself with the idea of caring for for another individual,
or the other, right?
and relying on that higher power to accomplish that. Now, some people say, well, the higher power is me. Well, I don't know if that's necessarily the case, but the power of beliefs is very strong, and we're wired. As a person thinketh in their heart, so are they. As you believe, that there's you hear about the different types of benefits there are from positive beliefs or so. That happens.
Maybe we could say, Dr. Campbell, that this notion of meaning, finding something bigger than yourself, as a Christian,
Yeah.
I'm going to call that God. But maybe if you're not, that maybe that's what gives you that agape love. Maybe.
That's good, because there are different forms of them. I shared with you earlier about, you have that eudaimonia, and you have hedonia, having to deal with happiness and satisfaction. It sort of breaks down that way. Eudaimonia, Greek term again, deals more with well-being, and a kind of a concern for others, meaning and purpose. That individual who has a meaning and purpose in their life, and they are motivated to achieve that meaning and purpose. Yet that's eudaimonia, happiness and satisfaction, for different. That, generally speaking, eudaimonia is associated with a healthier outcome than hedonia.
Okay.
Hedonism. We know that term from.
Now we go into class. This is where I'm starting to glaze over because I don't understand those words, but I think that others might understand. I understand
Yeah,
hedonia.
meaning and purpose, which comes from outside of yourself. Meaning and purpose. There's a reason that you're here, and there's a purpose and a meaning in your life. Working to achieve that brings satisfaction, and a health benefit as well. Again, we're talking about the other, helping. There's a benefit that comes, the motivation for working, to help another individual achieve their full potential.
looking beyond yourself. I think you've explained it quite well. And I didn't glaze over. That was the wrong thing to say to a professor. You did a great job of
Well, no, that happens at the end of, I don't know how long we've been going now. It looks like 45 minutes. It's about getting to the end of the class now. And you get that glazed over, you see a lot of that glazed over kind of
for me. That's about it for me.
in your classroom. But you just keep pushing anyway.
Al
You're in the
Campbell,
classroom now.
I think this has been a fascinating conversation. And I love the idea of agape affecting all the other kinds of love. And that's what you told me when we were talking about getting ready for this conversation.
Right. Yep.
You said you heard a song. What was that song that you heard that just all made sense?
Love is in need of love today. I believe it's something like that by Stevie Wonder. I don't know what Stevie meant. I think it had something to do with the birth of his child or so when he penned this, when he wrote this song. But immediately when I heard it, I said, that's it. You know, I looked at that sort of confirmation, actually. That's what these other forms, which are selfish, you know, when they're treated in that manner, when an eros is, you know, I'm in it to please myself and this and that and everywhere. And if the person can benefit from it, you know, well and good. Same thing about friends, you know, this friendship, reciprocate, you know, you scratch my back, you know, all of that. But when we think of, we get outside of ourselves and we think of that other person and that other person thriving, not just surviving, but prospering and thriving, and we're contributing to that, then we benefit as the benefactor, but also they do as the beneficiary. You know, it's sort of like a mirror kind of a thing. You know, you're going, but that person, that's not, you know, your behavior should not be contingent on that other person's behavior.
Right. You're doing it for the good of
higher purpose. That higher purpose.
Higher purpose. And you know what, Dr. Campbell, I don't know if I've been to church or a psychology class, but I'm glad I was here. And I thank you for joining us. And I want to thank you all for joining us. And if you can't think of anything else that we said tonight, just remember Stevie Wonder's song.
That's right.
Love in Need of Love Today. And we're going to play that for you as we say goodbye. Thanks a lot, Dr. Campbell. God bless.
Think about this song. This song really has, well, at least it had meaning to me. Love is in need of love.
Absolutely. Michael, you got the song?
Eros. All of those are in need of agape to be, you know, to be fully functioning.